here. But you could follow along with these techniques and sculpt just about any level you like. So the way we're going to do that is back on the sculpt tool in the landscape mode on the left hand side. I'm going to change our brush strength to something a lot smaller here. So I'm changing it to about 1000. And then the tool strength, I'm also increasing that to about 0.05. And I'm going to change the brush to a simple circular brush. And then the tool strength, I'm also increasing that. You can even see in my middle area here that it got raised up quite a bit relative to the actual block. So now what I want to do, basically the idea I have for this construct is we're going to build a garden. And the very center of the garden, I'm going to have a lake, and then I'm going to have basically four rivers that intersect into the lake from the four corners of the garden. So that's what I'm going to sculpt here. But you could follow along with these techniques and sculpt just about any level you like. So the way we're going to do that is back on the sculpt tool in the landscape mode on the left hand side. I'm going to change our brush strength to something a lot smaller here. So I'm changing it to about 1000. And then the tool strength, I'm also increasing that to about 0.05.
Hold on now. Where's the brush? Oh, brush size. There we go. So we want 1000.
And I'm going to change the brush inside. I'm going to change our brush strength to something a lot smaller here. So I'm changing it to about 1000. And then the tool strength, I'm also increasing that to about 0.05. And I'm going to change the brush to a simple circular brush. And now I'm going to sculpt out a lake, but I do want to have something in the very center of our lake. So I'm going to keep this block here for now, and that's kind of our landmark, our placeholder for what's the center of our lake. And so one thing you'll notice is if you hold left click, it makes everything higher up, and I'm going to Control Z. But one technique I really like is if you hold shift and then left click, it lowers things in the same way. And so I'm just going to do some even brush strokes around our center island there. And I'm just going to keep doing that. And actually, if I position myself directly above, like looking straight down, that's probably the best way to do this. So just left clicking, but holding shift and then doing circles around that, just to get a lowering effect, sculpting wise. That looks pretty good, so I'm just going to go ahead and hit play to see what this looks like. And I see in the top left I've got this can't edit landscapes in Pi, and that just means the player editor. Can't edit landscapes in there. But I'm looking around, and yeah, that's pretty good. We've got a little pond, and I think we're ready to continue sculpting. So the next thing I want to do is I want to create 4 rivers that basically start from each of the corners of our landscape and run directly into our lake in the center. And I played with this a little bit, and to get the effect I'm looking for, I need the tool strength at about 0.8 and the brush size to about 400. So it's actually quite small. You can think of these more like streams rather than rivers. But we are in a garden, so it's not a full-size landscape or anything like that. But we just want the effect of having a stream run through in kind of an S pattern all the way to the lake. And also one thing about the stream, just to get the desired visual effect in the end, make sure we've got enough bending in the stream that you can't really see past the bend if there's like tall foliage like trees or something like that. And I'll show you what I mean here. So I set my tool strength to 0.8, my brush size to 400, we're keeping the brush fall off exactly the same. And I'm still holding shift to lower the land. And we're just going to do one smooth brush stroke. So hold shift, click, and we're just going through, and you should see some.
Alright, let's see.
So the next thing I want to do is I want to create 4 rivers that basically start from each of the corners of our landscape and run directly into our lake in the center. And I played with this a little bit, and to get the effect I'm looking for, I need the tool strength at about 0.8 and the brush size to about 400. So it's actually quite small. You can think of these more like streams rather than rivers. But we are in a garden, so it's not a full-size landscape or anything like that. But we just want the effect of having a stream run through in kind of an S pattern all the way to the lake. And also, one thing about the stream, just to get the desired visual effect in the end, make sure we've got enough bending in the stream that you can't really see past the bend if there's like tall foliage like trees or something like that. And I'll show you what I mean here. So I set my tool strength to 0.8, my brush size to 400. We're keeping the brush fall off exactly the same. And I'm still holding shift to lower the land. And we're just going to do one smooth brush stroke. So hold shift, click, and we're just going through. And you should see something like this slowly draw itself over time. And you want to do this in one clean stroke. So you see how I messed up there? I'm just going to do Control Z because I really need to zoom out all the way. And I really should be directly above where I want to do this. So let's do this one more time. I'll hold shift and select and drag it out. And I want to keep going at an even speed as much as possible so that the river is not at, so it's basically the same height, same elevation in each area. So you don't want the S's to be like so bendy where it's You just want kind of a single smooth S or an S and a half there. So now I'm going to quickly do this for the other four corners, and I'll speed up this video.
Okay, so we're just...
All right, we got our 4 rivers, but how do we smooth this out a bit? The best way I found of doing this is we can reduce our tool strength down to something like 0.3. Oh, messed that up, 0.3. And then we can go over the areas that are a little jarring. So this, see if I see there, it's like it looks like Morse code kind of. And then we can just hold shift and we can smooth it out a little bit just by going over it one more time. And that'll lower everything, but it does smooth it out because we're basically only running over the areas that seem kind of bumpy. Yeah, this is another example there. And again, I should be directly over it when I'm doing this. That helps. Right over here, same kind of thing. Oh, messed that up. So that's it for the sculpting side of what we have in mind initially.
Okay, so we're just sculpting here to make some rivers that run towards the middle of this map. And this is all very arbitrary. Like, you don't need to do, if you're trying to do this kind of stuff, this is, not really needed stuff. It's kind of good to learn, though. The landscaping tool, like, once I figured out how this works, it's a really cool thing. And I'm not that good at it. Give me just a minute here. I'll be right back. Yes? Alright, I'm back. I wonder if these, it's sort of hard to tell, like, if my streams are really building because we're so far out, but I'm just kind of trusting. Okay, let's go take a look. I mean, I don't see that being big enough personally. This one's kind of too shallow, so I'm gonna just kind of dig in a little more on it a little bit. See this? I don't even know where it ends up curving. Right here, I guess. Oh shit. Okay. I have to hold down. You have to hold down shift while you do it, and I was not doing that, so it didn't work. Okay, so we got this. It comes over here. But like you can see, there's barely anything there to say that there's even a river. So I'll do that to make that more. And then I suppose we'll have to do that on every one of these to make sure that it looks right. And it is kind of neat, right? Look at that. it does work. It's just, you know, the way he's doing it, I feel it's too shallow. So, and obviously the best way to correct this, if you've got the hands and the feel for how to do things exact amount of time, right? Like a very smooth, steady hand would do best here. And you can just move it at the right speed, or you can increase the strength if you don't like how long it's taking. Okay, so there's that one. Now let's make sure this one's good as well. See, it's like, can you even see where my path is here? It's very... My rivers are going to be a little bit more deep and jagged. These are dangerous rivers I'm making here, okay? These ones, you need a white river rafting guide to go on my rivers. It's very important that you bring them or you will die. It's okay, it's a video game death. Alright, so one last area. What is going on there? I don't like that. I don't know what that is. Okay. You know, we got a nice little thing going on there. What is going on here? Is this like... Is that a hole? Like, what is this? I think that's just like an endless hole down there. What the hell is that? Fill in this hole. I think what we need is to flatten. Okay. So that's kind of a cool tool to do. Like, just flatten it, because obviously that was all a nightmare. Hey, actually that's kind of good. Right? It's a little bit jagged. You might add some noise, I bet you. Or retop. Does this work? No. Noise. Just to like... mess with that stuff? Nah. Okay. So, or smooth. I think smoothing. There, that'll work. Smooth that shit out. Okay. It's okay. This is more landscapey than what he's doing. It's kind of like the imperfections are what we need. I mean, look at this over here. This would be a dead end for a river. All right, let's go back to normal sculpting and do this. Brushed by the hand of God. And in this world, that's the cool thing about building a world, right? You are God to this world. And you can do messed up things like create characters that think they have free will. Alright. But not us, right? We're not like that. We have free will. Okay, so wait, we come this way? I guess. I did such a bad job with that path, I don't even know where it is. Okay, then this path. Okay, so now this all looks like it will be good enough to hold. Maybe this should probably be a little bit more pronounced here. This section of the river, yo. Let's do that. And the rest of that looks really good. I feel like now you can see clearly where these rivers are going to run. So let's go back to the video.
Actually, but the main issue we've got here is everything looks exactly the same, right? We got moss over that base layer for basically everything. And ideally we want a different material for our riverbed, for the bottom of our layer here. But also we want a different material for each of the quadrants that I've got here. So I'm going to have one quadrant that's mainly like a stone-based garden, and another one that's more like flowers and a field and stuff like that. So we need different materials. And so now we're going to cover how you can find materials via this gigantic library of content that's accessible through Unreal Engine's Quixel Bridge. And to do this, I'm going to leave the landscape mode just for a moment, go to Select, and the button directly next to Select Mode is this Import Content, or Bring in Content from various sources. The first option is Import Content. So if we have something from on our hard drive, something we got from an outside source, that's how you would use it. But then we have this Quixel Bridge, and that's what we're going to go into here. So Quixel Bridge is this giant library of content that Epic Games simply has, and it's all there, all for free, as long as you use it inside Unreal Engine. And there's 3D assets, so everything you can think of as an asset, but then there's also things like plants and surfaces. And the surfaces here on the left-hand side, these are the materials that I was just talking about. And this is what I'm going to show you how to bring in first. But there's a lot of other stuff that we're going to bring in from Quixel Bridge in future episodes.
I didn't realize
So the first thing is you've got to log into Quixel Bridge the same way you typically log into your Epic Games account. So in the top right corner, you would just go to Sign In, and you could sign in with Epic Games here. Once you sign in, you'll see everything loads, and then you're ready to go. So we're just going to bring in one material for this episode, but in the next episode, we're going to bring in 3 or 4 additional materials.
Okay. We're going to hide my browser for a minute, or display capture, or turn off for just a second here. Because I have to log into this stuff, and I don't know how to do it, so I might have to use passwords and all that stuff, so let's see. Well, let's look at my normal Epic. Which account am I in? Sanity's Edge account. Bring it up. Hopefully it will tell me which email I have. Yeah. Okay, so it's the one I figured. That's good news. So let's go back to it here. And is it the password I use for a lot of things? Okay. And setting a security code. Yeah, it's a good thing that I turned off my screen. All these people that aren't watching would be able to see otherwise. Alright. Got that. There. Continue. Allow. Okay. I think I can bring it back now. Just checking a couple of things before I set this back up. Okay, so display capture. That's what everyone wants. All the people that aren't watching want this. I agree. Get unlimited. Get started. Okay.
Materials. Now I'm going to show you how we can create a landscape material with paintable layers that we can begin painting our landscape. So what I'm going to choose for my material, if I just search for grass here, and there's a ton of grasses if you scroll down. I'm going to choose one that's kind of a darker grass, and we're going to keep going down here. Just see just how much content truly is here. So this looks pretty neat. This clover patches.
This is great.
I'm going to choose that. And if I select that, clover patches, oh, there we go. So when we select a material, we have the ability of choosing the quality with which we want to download. And for some of these materials in the future, especially when we're using these materials on static meshes like a wall or something, I'm definitely going to pick the highest quality. That's an 8K texture, and that's really nice because with Nanite, which is a feature of Unreal Engine, you can really get close to a texture that's super high quality, super high density, and see the full material, see the full effect of that, and zoom out and still get reasonable performance when using those massive textures. But for the case of our landscape, because with the landscape we don't actually have the 3D geometry, like we're not going to have clover physically sticking out of our grass landscape. I think high quality is sufficient there because I never want to have the camera so close to the landscape that the player can see that, oh, that's not a real kind of landscape. It's not 3D, right? It's just kind of a flat surface. So high quality, I think, will be sufficient here. So I'll select that and download. And depending on the speed of your internet, materials are pretty quick to download, should only take a few seconds, maybe a minute tops. And then once you've downloaded that, you can add it to your project here. And once you add it, you're going to see a new content browser automatically pop up with that new material. And the content browser is basically the same exact thing as the content drawer in the bottom left-hand corner. You can actually launch a separate content browser just by right-clicking on any folder here and then selecting Show a New Content Browser. And I'm going to talk about all of this, but let's just close out of this and we'll close out of Quixel Bridge. We'll come back to our level here. And if you navigate to the content drawer, and I'll go back to our main content folder, you'll now see that you have two brand new folders here. You have Megascans and MS Presets. Now let's cover MS Presets first, but even before then, let's back up for a moment. So Megascans is basically the library of Unreal Engine content. And originally that content's from a company called Quixel, and what Quixel did is they went all across the world and they scanned all these different locations, these assets, everything from materials to actual geometry like rocks and things like that. And so a lot of the content comes from that original company, Quixel. But Unreal Engine acquired Quixel, and now Megascans really is that entire library of free content.
Isn't that crazy?
And so whenever you download Megascans content, you automatically get what's called the MS Presets folder, Megascans Presets.
If
I go into that, it's a number of default materials. And we'll get more into this in the next episode. But materials are broken into what are called parent materials and child materials.
Let's see.
And child materials are often called material instances. But the idea is that you can have a very complex material. So just to give you an example, if I go into this default material and you have this graph, and that might not look all that complicated, but if I go in...
I am off, or I'm like, I hope people can still see. No, we're still going good. Okay. I'm not sure why it's telling me I'm offline when I try to open this. Okay. We're just kind of slow. But yeah, check us out. 3D assets. I wonder if you can do... Oh, look. Yeah, it says metahumans right here. I bet you. What? There's no way that you can scan these in to be like a real character in your game. Are you for real right now? Look at this. That's insane. The amount of stuff I'm gonna be using this. I am so glad. This is why I watch these videos. I mean, I just don't know enough. And then you find this stuff. And look at this. I mean, like, say I'm trying to build anything, really. I can just go straight into, like, there's all of these different rocks I can use if I need to. Surfaces, decals, imperfections. There's different collections of things. Fingerprints, unfinished building specials. I mean, that's cool, dude. That is... Oh, okay. Well, I'm going
to this adjustments, then we're getting into some... Download Megascans content, you automatically get what's called the MS Presets folder, Megascans Presets. If I go into that, it's a number of default materials. And we'll get more into this in the next episode, but materials are broken into what are called parent materials and child materials. And child materials are often called material instances. But the idea is that you can have a very complex material. So just to give you an example, if I go into this default material and you have this graph, and that might not look all that complicated, but if I go into this adjustments, then we're getting into something pretty crazy, right? So Megascans has all these default materials that, quite frankly, we don't really have to modify very much because they work so well out of the box.
Wow.
But if I go back to our content drawer, and if I go back now to our content and then the Megascans folder, so this is where all the child materials will come in, things that we actually download. And so there's different kinds of materials. So there's surfaces, which the clover on grass that we just downloaded is an example of that. But there's also things like decals, which are materials on top of materials, like a poster could be on top of a wall, things like that. And you'll see other folders appear here as we proceed through our series. But if I select surfaces here, and I go into clover patches on grass, so this is our child material. This is what's called the material instance. And these child materials that we download from Quixel Bridge, they're always going to come with 3 textures that you see here. So one is our base color. This is actually what the material looks like. But then to give it proper lighting and shadow, we need 2 other things. One is the normal map, which is basically the height map. It's basically the height of each of the grass petals and all that data to make it lit properly. And the last one is something called ambient occlusion, which is how ambient lighting affects the texture. And so basically just downloading these 3 things, if I go into our child material, the child material contains those 3 files, but then all the work, the heavy duty work of generating that material is done in this default MS Presets MS Surface material. That's the parent material that we talked about earlier. So that's a 40,000 foot view of how the material structure works within Unreal Engine, but we're going to get into this much more in the next episode. So I'll close out of our surface material and our clover patches on grass. And so now let's experiment putting this on our landscape. So on the right hand side in our world outliner, our landscape is actually divided into many different pieces here. And if you select a piece, you'll see that highlight in the world. And that's being generated from world partition that's now automatically part of Unreal Engine 5. So if I scroll up and select our very top landscape streaming proxy and hold shift and then select the bottom, I can highlight all of them. And then down here, if I scroll down on the right hand side, this is where we have our landscape material that we gave when we created the landscape. And we can change this out. So if I come down to our content drawer and I drag in our clover patches on grass, and voila, all of a sudden we've got a completely different landscape material. But something weird's going on, right? So let's hit play and let's see what's going on. So if I zoom in very close, I'm going to zoom into my character. So up close, the material actually looks pretty nice, right? I can actually see the grass and the clover patches, and the way it's being shaded there on the side looks really nice. But then the problem is, as I zoom out, so it's doing something called tiling. It's basically taking that base texture and then just repeating it in a standard pattern across the landscape.
Hold on, it's not working. Let's see what's going on here.
The right-hand side, this is where we have our landscape material that we gave when we created the landscape outliner. Our landscape is actually divided into many different pieces here. And if you select a piece, you'll see that highlight in the world. And that's being generated from world partition that's now automatically part of Unreal Engine 5. So if I scroll up and select our very top landscape streaming proxy and hold shift and then select the bottom, I can highlight all of them. And then down here, if I scroll down on the right hand side, this is where we have our landscape material that we gave when we created the landscape. And we can change this out. So if I come down to our content drawer and I drag in our clover patches on grass, and voila, all of a sudden we've got a completely different landscape material. But something weird's going on, right? So let's hit play and let's see what's going on. So if I zoom in very close, I'm going to zoom into my character. So up close, the material actually looks pretty nice, right? I can actually see the grass and the clover patches, and the way it's being shaded there on the side looks really nice. But then the problem is, as I zoom out, so it's doing something called tiling. It's basically taking that base texture and then just repeating it in a standard pattern across the landscape.
Yeah.
And obviously we don't want that to happen. And if you remember, when I selected the moss material, it didn't tile like that. We had this completely randomized pattern across the landscape. So this is exactly what we're going to get into next episode. I'm going to show you how to use that moss material and some other tricks I know to truly randomize the look and feel of materials. And then also within landscape mode under paint, I'm going to show you how we can paint our different quadrants of our landscape here, each a different material using Quixel Bridge materials. And the last thing we're going to cover is how to automate part of that painting in our landscape based on the height data. So for example,
Okay, so next time, tomorrow, what we're going to do, we're going to find a way to make sure that this doesn't look so predictable, like too patterned. You know, we don't want our peons on this planet we're making to be sure that there's a god, because there's too much, you know, you got to have a little bit more randomization. You know, they'll be like, hey, look, everything's exactly the same. Someone didn't do a very good job designing our world. All right, so we're going to make that happen. And we're going to go through painting so we can make these quadrants different if we feel like it. And we're going to make a height map. So a height map's pretty cool. What it's going to do is down at the bottom of our rivers, there's going to be a bed. And at that level, if you paint these height maps, it'll put that material if there's something down deeper. And it'll actually put the grass if you're up at a higher altitude. And then if I want, I can even put mountains higher in the height map. And if something's above that level on the height map, it's going to look like mountains, which simplifies a lot of hard work if you were trying to paint everything to look exactly right. So